What if everything we thought we knew about Archie Harrison was a lie? Not just a misunderstanding, not a PR stunt, but a calculated illusion designed to protect something or someone far more scandalous than the public was ever meant to know. For years, the world has been carefully fed a narrative, a fairy tale. A prince marries a Hollywood starlet. They retreat from the royal machine. They have a baby. They protect him from the limelight. The story ends. Right? Wrong. Because just beneath that shiny surface, behind those filtered photos and those perfectly timed press statements, lies a secret that is starting to rot from the inside out. And the first crack? It came from someone nobody saw coming, the ex-nanny. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. She was there, at the beginning. When the cameras weren't rolling, when the world was distracted by tiaras and baby bumps, she saw what was happening behind closed doors. And now, after years of forced silence, gag orders, and threats cloaked in luxury, she's breaking free. Why now? Why risk everything? Because she says what she witnessed haunts her every time she sees Archie's face in a tabloid. She's not doing this for attention. She's not writing a book. She's not selling a documentary. In fact, she's terrified. But something changed. Something pushed her over the edge. And the truth? It's about to detonate. Let's make something clear right now. This isn't just about one child. This is about a monarchy, a bloodline, a billion-dollar brand, and the question of who really belongs on that family tree. If what this ex-nanny says is even half true, the implications are staggering. And the lies, well, they started long before that Lindo Wing photo op ever happened. Let's rewind, just for a second. Do you remember how strange everything felt when Archie was born? No royal baby photos on the hospital steps. No traditional media call-out. No confirmation of which hospital Meghan gave birth in, even though the British press had always known before. A vague, conflicting timeline. And then, suddenly, photos of Prince Harry beaming outside Windsor Castle. A blurry press shot. A wrapped-up newborn in a white knit cap. Meghan wearing white. But something felt off, didn't it? Did you notice? Because she did. The nanny. She was there in those first hours when staff scrambled, when aides whispered in coded language, when security was tighter than it had ever been, even compared to the Queen's Jubilee. And according to her, what happened during those 48 hours wasn't just odd, it was orchestrated. She says a baby was brought in, that medical staff were replaced at the last minute, that even Meghan looked startled, not maternal, when the baby was handed to her. And the strangest thing of all, she wasn't allowed to touch him. Not even once. The woman hired to care for him full-time, whose entire job was to assist with feeding, changing, sleep schedules, was told, observe only. Do not interact. That's not just unusual. That's unprecedented. And for the nanny, it was the first red flag in a job that would spiral into something far more sinister than she ever imagined. At the time, she didn't question it. How could she? She had signed papers. Thick ones. Legal jargon. Non-disclosure clauses. She had been told this was for the family's safety, that she would be briefed when appropriate, and she wanted to believe that. But over the coming weeks, things only got weirder. She began noticing inconsistencies. The baby's birth weight seemed to change in briefing memos. A lullaby Meghan claimed to sing to Archie every night since birth was one the nanny only ever heard once. And most disturbing of all, sometimes the baby wasn't there at all. Entire nights passed where the nursery was empty. No crying, no diapers, no late-night feedings. And the next day, a different baby blanket, a different scent, and once, she swore, a different baby. At first, she dismissed it. I'm overworked, she told herself. They must be taking him elsewhere for privacy. But eventually, her gut told her something darker was at play. And then came the incident. One late evening, while walking down the hallway toward the kitchen, she heard voices through a partially closed door. Meghan. A man, not Harry. And a sentence that stopped her cold. No one can know. If this gets out, everything we've built collapses. The next day, she was fired. Just like that. Escorted out with no notice. No thank you. No reference letter. No final paycheck. Only silence. Until now. Because the truth refuses to stay buried. Because documents surface. Photos leak. Staff talk. And this nanny, this woman who was silenced by a palace machine and a Hollywood PR juggernaut, is finally ready to tell everything. She has the texts, the voicemails, the timelines, the emails she wasn't supposed to keep, the memories she can't erase. And it all points to one devastating possibility. Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor is not who we've been told he is. So, what really happened behind the nursery doors at Frogmore Cottage? Who is Archie, really? Why did the media back off? Why did palace staff disappear overnight? Why was Meghan's name erased from his birth certificate? And why, above all else, was this nanny warned, for your own safety, to never speak of what she saw again? Because now she is speaking. She's speaking loudly. And the world? It may never look at the Sussexes the same way again. But this is just the beginning. Because when she left the royal residence, she took more than memories with her. She took proof. And in this exposé, we're going to break down everything, from the South African tour cover-up, to the conflicting baby photos, to the quietly erased hospital records. Every thread will be pulled. Every lie will be unraveled. And by the end of this story, you'll be left wondering, if Archie isn't theirs, then whose child is he? But before we go deeper, remember this. Sometimes, the biggest royal scandal isn't the one splashed on the front page. It's the one hiding in plain sight. Quiet. Innocent-looking, wrapped in a blanket, and placed in a photo op designed to distract. The truth is coming. But what comes next will change everything. And no one saw it coming. They told her it was a dream job. But by the time she was gone, it felt more like a trap. Let me ask you something. Why would the first nanny of a royal baby, one of the most famous babies on the planet, be quietly fired in the dead of night, with no official statement, no send-off, and no mention of her ever again? Why would she vanish so completely that even palace insiders pretend she never existed? And more importantly, what did she see? Because something happened, and the palace doesn't want you to know. Let's rewind. When Meghan and Harry welcomed Archie in May 2019, it was supposed to be a fresh chapter, a breath of modernity in a dusty institution. The mixed race, American Duchess gives birth to the first biracial baby in the British royal family. History is made. The headlines wrote themselves. But behind those carefully curated Instagram posts and smiling photo calls, panic was already brewing. The couple had already made the unprecedented decision to not present the baby on the hospital steps like William and Kate had. There were whispers Meghan had refused royal doctors, that she gave birth somewhere private, maybe even at home. But no one could confirm anything. Still, the public was charmed. Archie was born. He was adorable. And Meghan and Harry, whether you like them or not, were officially parents. Then came the nanny, a private hire, not from the usual Norland College pool that the royals typically favored. This woman had no public-facing name, no photos, not even a press release, just a vague mention in passing from a royal source. The Sussexes have enlisted a night nurse to assist with Archie's early weeks. That was it. But what most people didn't know was this, that Nanny never made it past the first week. She was let go abruptly, quietly, and completely scrubbed from existence. Here's what the public heard. Nothing. Here's what the palace said. No comment. And here's what the staff whispered behind closed doors. She saw something she wasn't supposed to. Now let's be clear. The royal household fires staff all the time. That's not new. But this wasn't a mid-level aide or an intern. This was the person living with the Sussexes, sleeping just feet away from their newborn. The one person who would have seen firsthand if anything didn't quite add up. And according to an inside source, the reason for her sudden dismissal was chillingly vague, a breach of protocol. But here's the kicker. There was no explanation of what that breach was. No clarification. No evidence. Just gone. Why? Let's break it down. According to the ex-nanny, whose identity we're protecting, the job started like any other. She was told she'd be caring for a newborn under extremely private conditions. That she'd be staying at Frogmore Cottage. That she'd be reporting to Meghan directly. That discretion was not only expected, it was contractually required. Nothing unusual so far, right? But from the very first night, things were off. She never saw Archie. Not in the way you'd expect, at least. She was given a monitor, standard for new parents. But it wasn't hooked up to a crib in the nursery. It was connected to a private room downstairs. A room she wasn't allowed to enter. Ever. When she asked about night feeds, she was told not to worry. It's being handled, Meghan reportedly said with a tight smile. When she asked about diaper changes, bathing schedules, bottle prep, Again, shut down. We'll call you if we need anything, a male staffer allegedly replied. But no calls ever came. For 3 nights, she stayed in a guest suite. Wasn't summoned once. Wasn't asked to hold the baby. And every time she passed the nursery, it was locked. Then, on the 4th night, she heard something. Voices. Not angry, but urgent. Meghan. A man's voice, not Harry's. And then silence. Moments later, Harry came storming down the hallway. He looked pale, tense. When he saw the nanny standing there, he froze. Then, curtly, "You're not needed tonight." She never saw him again. The next morning, a senior aide knocked on her door. No eye contact. No pleasantries. Just 3 words. "You're being replaced." No warning. No feedback. No reference. She was escorted out through the back entrance. Her things already packed for her. A car idling with dark windows. And on the seat beside her, a new NDA, even stricter than the last, with a clause that chilled her. Under penalty of legal prosecution, you are forbidden to disclose any information pertaining to the child or its care. The child. Not the baby. Not Archie. The child. Dehumanizing? Or deliberate? You tell me. So who replaced her? That's the next odd twist. For weeks afterward, the Sussexes reportedly cycled through multiple nannies. Some stayed a few days. Some barely 48 hours. All kept out of the press. All sworn to secrecy. It wasn't until months later that they finally hired a permanent nanny, one who did appear in a photo briefly during their Africa tour. But even she never gave interviews. Never published a memoir. Never so much as posted a selfie. Unusual? Now ask yourself this. Why would a couple so fiercely controlling of their image suddenly become so secretive about something as mundane as childcare? Why silence the first nanny completely? Why not offer a simple explanation? Was she incompetent? Did she break a rule? Or did she see something and get too close? Because according to someone close to the situation, that first nanny began asking questions. About the baby's schedule. About why certain days the nursery was sealed off. About why the child seemed older than expected. Bigger. With a different cry. She told a friend, confidentially, that some days it felt like there was a different baby altogether. And then, just as quickly as she had arrived, she was erased. No LinkedIn update. No industry gossip. No clients. Just a woman with a secret, and a warning letter telling her to forget everything. But here's the twist. She didn't forget. She kept a journal. Detailed. Daily. With timestamps, names, feelings. A paper trail, hidden in a storage unit. Untouched. Until recently. And what's inside that journal? We'll get there. But for now, remember this. No one just disappears from the royal household. Not without a reason. Not without whispers. And this nanny? She didn't vanish because she failed. She vanished because she saw too much. But what came next would make her question whether the baby she was hired to care for had ever been Meghan and Harry's to begin with. Let's talk about the journal. Tucked away in a beat-up leather binder. Pages yellowing slightly, ink faded but legible. Nothing flashy. Just a diary from a woman who, after years of silence, couldn't carry the burden alone anymore. She never intended to weaponize it. She wrote in it as therapy. After her dismissal, she couldn't sleep. She couldn't make sense of what had happened. So she wrote. Every single day. Every detail she could remember. And what she wrote is chilling. Let's dive into a few key entries. May 9th, 2019, day 1 on the job. Met with Meghan in the garden. She seemed distracted. Not like a new mother. Didn't mention the baby at all. Just said, "You'll find your room down the hall. We'll call when we need you." She never saw Archie that day. May 10th, 2019. The nursery is off limits. Was told I wouldn't be allowed into the nursery without explicit permission. That's not standard practice. I'm the night nurse. I'm trained for sleep routines and infant safety. Why am I locked out? She asked again that evening. This time, she was ignored. May 11th, 2019, 2 cribs. Strangest thing tonight. One aide left the nursery door slightly ajar. I peeked in. 2 cribs. Only one occupied. But which one is real? Why would there be 2? Then she describes hearing muffled voices outside her room. She pressed her ear to the door. A phrase stands out, etched into her memory. The fewer people who handle him, the better. May 12th, 2019, the warning. Spoke to one of the housekeeping girls. She looked nervous. Said something odd. "You're lucky. You're not here when the other one's around. I asked what she meant. She changed the subject immediately. Something is off. By this point in the journal, her entries begin to spiral. Confusion, anxiety, and finally, panic. May 13th, 2019, the incident. Was getting tea late. Past the study. Heard Meghan say, "We'll rotate again this weekend. Just one more interview, then we're done." Rotate what? Another child? Another staff member? Starting to think I'm not just being left out. I'm being kept out. That same night, she claims she finally saw the baby up close. But only for a second. May 14th, 2019, that wasn't the same baby. The child I saw tonight had darker hair. Different shaped eyes. I'm not crazy. I know what I saw 2 nights ago. Something's wrong. If I ask questions, they'll know I've noticed. What do? The next morning, she was dismissed. No explanation. Just silence. Now let's pause. Maybe you're thinking, this is paranoia, right? People misremember things. Memories blur. Emotions run high. But here's the twist that puts everything into question. The nanny kept a copy of her original employment contract. And one clause, hidden in legal jargon, mentions something that doesn't exist in any other royal nanny contract we've seen before. A clause that reads, "The employee agrees to refrain from inquiring about the identity, origin, or biological parentage of the child, wren under care." Let that sink in. Why would a contract specify that? What other royal nanny was told to avoid asking about the child's parentage? And if everything was normal, if Meghan gave birth naturally, if the baby was Archie, if there was no surrogate, no second child, no deception, then why was that clause necessary? That's not protection. That's preemption. A red flag if there ever was one. And remember, we're not even into the full-blown media circus yet. This is just the first few weeks of Archie's life. Before the Netflix deals. Before Spotify. Before America. Before Montecito. At this point, Meghan and Harry were still part of the royal fold. Still under the Queen's watchful eye. So if this was a game they were playing, it was a dangerous one. But here's what really pushed the nanny to come forward. Not the dismissal. Not the silence. Not even the NDA threats. It was what she saw months later. You see, like the rest of us, she watched from afar. She saw photos of Archie pop up on tabloids, Instagram posts, birthday cards, family portraits, and one photo in particular stopped her cold. Archie's first birthday video. You remember the one, right? Meghan reading duck, rabbit, to Archie on the floor. Natural light. Baby giggles. Meghan in a casual blue shirt. It was meant to be sweet, innocent. But to the nanny? Something was off. Archie's ears. His profile. His hairline. "This is not the baby I met," she told a friend. "He's not even close." She sat with that thought for weeks. Rewatched the video a dozen times. Then went back to her journal. Cross-checked timelines. Checked her photos. Her notes. The baby she saw on May 13th didn't match the child in the birthday video. At all. And here's where it gets worse. She wasn't the only one who thought so. Another staffer, who briefly worked during Meghan's baby shower planning, confided in her months later. Anonymous, off the record. There were 2 of everything. 2 bassinets. 2 name tags. Even 2 car seats. We assumed it was backup. But now? I'm not so sure. Now it sounds like science fiction, doesn't it? But think about it. If Meghan and Harry did use a surrogate, legally or otherwise, and were building a cover story, wouldn't they need 2 babies? One for photos. One for public appearances. Swapped based on lighting, press access, or risk. It sounds wild, until you remember how tightly the Sussexes controlled Archie's exposure. How few photos exist. How no media ever saw him directly for over a year. No christening photos with guests. No paparazzi shots. Only hand-picked, filtered images, released on their terms. Because maybe, just maybe, they couldn't risk the wrong child being seen. And that first nanny? She may have gotten too close to figuring that out. Too many questions. Too many nights alone with secrets. Too much truth. And just like that, she was erased. But now, she's no longer silent. She's handed over documents, emails, journal scans, audio memos. She's willing to testify under oath if it ever came to that. Because she says the world deserves to know the truth. Not just for the monarchy. Not just for Meghan and Harry. But for the child, whatever his real name may be. Because if Archie Harrison isn't who we were told he is, Then the real story is about to explode. And what the nanny didn't know, until much later, was that this was only the beginning of a carefully crafted deception. Because the next person to notice something strange wasn't in the nursery. They were on the royal tour. And what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What happens when a staged photo opportunity goes just slightly off script? What happens when, in the middle of a royal tour, someone slips, just for a second, and forgets the lines? The truth leaks out. And when it comes to Meghan, Harry, and baby Archie, that leak didn't happen in Buckingham Palace or Montecito. It happened in South Africa. Let's set the scene. It's September 2019. For months after Archie's supposed birth, the Sussexes are on their first official overseas tour as a family of three. The British press is buzzing. This is their post-baby debut, their moment to rebrand, connect with the world, and silence the critics. Meghan is beaming. Harry looks relaxed. And somewhere, always close, but never too close, is baby Archie. At least, we're told it's Archie. But it was during this tour, in Cape Town, that the cracks started to show. And they came from the last place anyone expected, a fire. Not a metaphor. A literal fire. You might remember it. Meghan later described it in an interview. How there was a small blaze in the room where Archie's crib was. How the nanny had taken Archie out just in time to grab a snack downstairs. It was framed as a heart-stopping moment. A mother's worst nightmare. Except, something didn't add up. Let's dig in. First, according to Meghan, Archie wasn't in the room when the fire broke out. She says the nanny had taken him downstairs for a snack just before the incident. Sounds reasonable, right? Until you remember Archie was allegedly 4 months old. For months. Barely able to sit up. Still on breast milk or formula. Not eating snacks. And certainly not toddling around with a caregiver to the kitchen. This wasn't a toddler looking for crackers. This was an infant. So why would a royal nanny take a 4-month-old out of the nursery for a snack? It doesn't make sense. And yet, nobody questioned it. The press ran the story as is. But for the former nanny, the one we met in Chapter 1, it was the moment everything clicked. Because that story, that contradiction, that bizarre anecdote Meghan dropped months later, it mirrored something the ex-nanny had seen before. A cover. A detail slipped in to explain something else. She said, "That's what they did with me." Gave me a made-up reason, hoping I'd stop asking questions. And here's where it gets even stranger. The media covering the South African tour noticed something odd too. Baby Archie, when he was seen, looked older than expected. Full cheeks. A more mature head shape. Eyes that followed the camera in a way newborns usually don't. One veteran royal correspondent whispered it during a live stream. He looks about 8 months, not 4. The footage was quickly cut. Coincidence? Now, let's talk about the appearances. Archie was only brought out in very specific settings. One time, in Desmond Tutu's Cape Town home. A photo op highlighting. Press positioned behind glass. The photos went viral. Meghan held Archie, who wore tiny striped overalls and seemed calm, maybe even curious. But something was off. Several online commentators noticed it immediately. The child's size. Archie, if born in May 2019, should have been just past 4 months old. But pediatric experts online, and yes, some of them were doctors, began pointing out subtle developmental discrepancies. Archie could hold his head up perfectly. He was sitting upright with no visible back support. He made direct, prolonged eye contact with the photographers. His coordination suggested motor skills more akin to a 6 to 8 month old. Of course, babies develop differently, some faster than others. But when every trait leans older, it raises questions. And when paired with the South African fire story, it starts to look like something more. Especially when the nanny's journal comes back into play. She had written this entry the night before she was fired. They're preparing for a trip. But not just packing. They're rehearsing. It's like a script. Everyone's practicing lines, tones, who will hold the baby, when. Feels more like a production than a family outing. Let's pause on that word. Production. What does it mean when a royal tour, which should be about diplomacy, charity, and authenticity, feels like a production? Because the Cape Town visit didn't just have one camera crew. It had multiple. Some were palace-sanctioned. Some were private. And one, according to our source, belonged to Netflix, well before the public knew about any Netflix deal. How? Why? What were they filming? Officially? Nothing. Unofficially? Well, you tell me. And it gets more tangled. Because after the fire incident, Archie vanished from the tour. No more appearances. No more photos. No more sightings. It was explained as scheduling, as privacy, as protection. But remember, this was their first big family tour. The baby was supposed to be front and center. Instead, he was airbrushed out. And the former nanny? She believes she knows why. Because the baby shown at the Desmond Tutu visit wasn't the same baby Meghan had held in the days after his alleged birth. In her words, that baby had different ears, a different face shape. I remember Archie had a prominent cleft in his chin. This one didn't. She cross-referenced photos from May and September. She wasn't the only one. Side-by-side comparisons flooded forums. And a pattern emerged. The baby seen in South Africa didn't match the early portraits from Windsor. Again, babies grow fast. Features change. Lighting tricks the eye. But every photo, every angle, every appearance pointing to a different child? That's not evolution. That's substitution. But why? Why risk that? What could possibly be worth swapping a baby during a royal tour? And here's the kicker. An anonymous palace aide, since retired, offered this chilling line to a journalist under strict anonymity. They weren't just hiding the baby. They were hiding the story. Because somewhere along the line, it wasn't just about protecting Archie. It was about protecting the narrative, who he was, where he came from, and what it would mean if anyone found out the truth. Because according to the aide, the royal family had already received multiple legal inquiries into Archie's birth. Journalists were digging. Private investigators were sniffing around. Questions about birth certificates, citizenship status, and hospital records were piling up. And the Sussexes? They were on high alert. The aide claimed, that tour wasn't just a goodwill mission. It was a test. Could they control the optics? Could they manage a global stage without the truth slipping out? And for the most part, they did. Until Meghan slipped. Until that fire story, which didn't make sense, was broadcast to the world. And the nanny? She watched it happen. And she realized, I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. Something was wrong. And now it was playing out in front of millions. But that wasn't the end of it. Because when the tour ended, another mystery began. The baby who returned to the UK. Was he the same one who left? And why did one staff member at Heathrow claim the baby carrier was empty? Why did airport handlers report an unusually high level of secrecy around the Sussexes' baggage? Why did a customs officer say Meghan looked nervous, like someone hiding something, not returning home? And what about the second nanny hired after the trip, who also disappeared? Another quiet dismissal. Another erased figure. Another voice silenced. Except this one left behind a voicemail. A panicked message sent to a colleague late one night. Only 12 words. But they say everything. I know too much. It's not safe. The baby isn't theirs. I know too much. It's not safe. The baby isn't theirs. 12 words. Sent in a rush. No follow-up. No explanation. No voice heard again. That voicemail, recovered by a former staffer who kept it in a hidden email backup, is now being looked at as one of the most explosive pieces of the Sussex mystery. A breadcrumb in a trail that winds through royal protocols, international borders, NDAs, and ultimately, something far darker. Because after the South African tour, everything changed. The tone shifted. The couple's behavior evolved. Or rather, hardened. They began cutting people out. Longtime staffers, royal correspondents, photographers, even friendly press, like ITV's Tom Bradby, was suddenly kept at a distance. There was a shift from defensiveness to paranoia, from protect the baby to protect the secret. And for the insiders watching closely, there was one central question hovering over it all. What are they so afraid we'll find out? Let's dig into the timeline. Shortly after returning from South Africa in early October 2019, Meghan and Harry launched lawsuits against multiple British tabloids. They claimed violations of privacy, unethical publication of Meghan's private letters, and a wider smear campaign. But critics, especially within palace walls, noticed something else. It wasn't just about the headlines, one insider said. It was about control. Total control. And one of the tabloid stories that vanished from circulation just days after legal threats? A piece speculating that Archie may have been born earlier than the official May 6th date. Why does that matter? Because if Archie were born in, say, late March or early April, It would line up almost perfectly with how old he looked during the South African tour. It would also call into question Meghan's entire pregnancy timeline, including public appearances where her bump size appeared to fluctuate wildly. But the story disappeared. Scrubbed. Memory hold. Another coincidence? Let's not forget, this is the same couple who claimed to be fighting for transparency. And yet, when it came to their own child, the veil only got thicker. Now, here's something the public never heard. According to an airline manifest obtained through unofficial channels, the Sussexes returned to the UK on a private jet chartered under a non-royal alias. That's not uncommon for security reasons. But here's the catch. There were two separate infant passengers listed on the return flight. One under the alias A. Harrison. Fair enough. But the second? Blank name. No age. No parent attached. Just INF02. Was this a clerical error? Or a record of something much stranger? Was a second baby aboard that flight? If so, who was it? And why the anonymity? According to the ex-nanny, who reviewed the manifest during her brief employment with the Sussex household scheduling team before being dismissed, this was not the only time multiple infant travel entries were filed. She claimed there were 4 separate instances where 2 infants were recorded on travel schedules, but only one was ever seen in public. We were always told to prep double, she said. 2 bassinets, 2 sets of baby clothes, 2 baby monitors. At first, we assumed they were being overly cautious. But eventually, we realized they were being deliberately redundant. For appearance management, let's pause for a moment. Ask yourself, what would drive a couple already under the media microscope to orchestrate something this complex? Why maintain 2 separate infant travel kits? Why allow conflicting stories about a fire in a nursery, a snack for a 4-month-old, and a baby who looked 8 months old? Why rotate nannies so often that none stay long enough to question what's really going on? Because the story we've been told, clean, official, media-friendly, doesn't hold. Let's get even closer to the moment things cracked wide open. Do you remember Meghan's controversial interview with ITV in October 2019? It was filmed during the South African tour, just days after the fire incident, and aired not long after. Meghan said she was not okay, that she was struggling, that few people had asked if she was all right. The world focused on the vulnerability, the tears, the confession, but what most people missed was what came before the tears. The part where Meghan deflected a simple question about motherhood. How has being a mother changed things for you? A question any new mom could answer in a heartbeat. But Meghan paused, stumbled, then gave a rehearsed, abstract answer about balance, public service, and staying grounded. Nothing personal, nothing instinctive, nothing maternal. No story about Archie's first smile. No mention of sleepless nights. No joy over baby giggles. It was robotic. And for a woman known for her storytelling flair, that silence was deafening. According to the former nanny, that moment spoke volumes. She wasn't struggling with motherhood. She was struggling with the illusion of motherhood. There's a difference. That quote has haunted journalists ever since. Because maybe, just maybe, the real emotional burden wasn't postpartum depression or media pressure. Maybe it was the weight of holding up a lie. And it wasn't just Meghan. Harry, too, began to change. Gone was the goofy prince, the cheeky rebel. In his place, a tightly wound man with visible tension in every public appearance. He became fiercely protective of Archie, but in a way that felt performative, like a man desperate to believe in a narrative he couldn't fully control. Remember that time he snapped at a reporter for asking how Archie was doing? He's fine, thank you. He's always fine. Delivered with an edge, not warmth. Why the defensiveness? Why the agitation? Because, according to sources, Harry was carrying something heavy. A secret he didn't agree to. One that was eating at him. He didn't plan the deception, said one former staffer. But he went along with it. For Meghan. For their future. But it's been tearing him apart. So what now? What do we do with this? A baby that looks different. A timeline that doesn't fit. A fire story that falls apart. 2 nannies gone. 2 babies logged on flight records. And 2 parents who seem more like co-stars in a high-stakes royal thriller than a new mom and dad. And we're only scratching the surface. Because the journal entries, the ones the ex-nanny hid in that leather binder, they didn't stop when she was fired. She continued writing, watching, listening, piecing together fragments from colleagues, emails, media appearances. And what she discovered next would take everything to another level. Because if the South African tour cracked the facade, the birth certificate scandal blew the door wide open. And what she found scribbled at the bottom of one early medical intake form was a name no one was supposed to see. A name that wasn't Meghan Markle. A name that doesn't belong in the royal family at all. What kind of mother erases her own name from her child's birth certificate? No, seriously, ask yourself. What kind of woman, who's just given birth to a royal baby, one of the most watched infants in modern history, goes back and removes her own identity from one of the most permanent legal documents in existence? Because that's exactly what Meghan Markle did. Or rather, someone did it for her. And the world barely blinked. Let's break it down. Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor was born on May 6, 2019. Standard practice in the UK is to register a birth within 42 days. Sure enough, on May 17th, his birth certificate was quietly filed. It listed the usual details: the baby's full name, date of birth, place of birth, Portland Hospital, in this case, and under mother's name, Rachel Meghan, Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Sussex. Makes sense, right? Except just a few weeks later, something happened behind closed doors. A correction was filed. The mother's name was changed. No longer Rachel Meghan Markle. No longer Duchess of Sussex. Now simply, Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Sussex. No first name. No last name. Just the title. She was reduced to a role, not a person. The public didn't notice. Not until nearly 2 years later, when the correction was leaked. And by then, the Sussexes were already in California, building empires, firing legal shots at tabloids, and preaching about truth and transparency. When reporters questioned the odd revision, Meghan's spokesperson immediately went into defense mode. The change was dictated by the palace, as confirmed by documents from senior palace officials. This was not requested by Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex. But then, the palace fired back. They denied making the request. So who's lying? Because someone authorized that change. Someone altered a royal baby's legal record post-registration, without explanation, without precedent. And here's where it gets wild. The nanny? She saw the original. Not the edited certificate that was made public. The first one. The one that listed both parents in full. And she says there was something else on it. Something that disappeared when the document was corrected. An asterisk. Tiny. Almost invisible. Next to Archie's name. No one ever explained it. But in medical records, an asterisk usually denotes a note. A special condition. Something unusual. And when the ex-nanny asked about it, she was told, that's not something you need to concern yourself with. She was caring for the child. Feeding, monitoring, sleeping nearby. And yet, they told her not to worry about a medical asterisk? That alone was alarming. But when paired with the mother's name being deleted, suddenly, it wasn't just alarming. It was explosive. Because there are only a few reasons a mother's legal name would be removed from a birth certificate after the fact. Legal disputes over maternity, surrogacy concealment, protective identity shielding in high-risk cases. But Meghan wasn't in witness protection. She wasn't a surrogate herself. And there were no maternity disputes, at least, not publicly. So again, why the edit? Let's add another layer. In the UK, if a child is born via gestational surrogate, there are legal protocols. The birth mother, meaning the woman who physically gives birth, is listed as the mother on the certificate at first. Only later, after a legal process, is the child transferred to the intended parents via a parental order. In those cases, the original birth certificate is sealed. A new one is issued. So if Meghan wasn't the biological or birth mother, hypothetically, the Sussexes would have had to go through this process. But there's no public record of such an order. And yet, the style of the edited certificate seems to reflect that very structure, as if Meghan's personal identity was being scrubbed to fit a narrative, or worse, to conceal a substitution. And it wasn't just the certificate. According to internal notes from a former hospital administrator, obtained via encrypted email by a whistleblower, Meghan's medical registration file was locked just 24 hours after Archie's birth. That's not common. That's high-level security protocol, reserved for sensitive intelligence officials or celebrities under credible threat. Why would a new mother's file be locked? And why was it registered under her title only, not her legal name? What were they trying to hide? And here's the sharpest twist of all. That same administrator claims that 2 sets of birth logs were created on May 6th. 2 different babies, 2 different timestamps, 2 different delivery rooms, but only 1 certificate ever surfaced. So what happened to the second? Who was the other baby? And why would there be a parallel birth record for the same family? The nanny says she remembers the confusion in the early hours. She overheard 2 staffers arguing over which file to send. She thought it was a paperwork mix-up. Now, she believes it was a cover-up. And here's where the evidence tightens. A photographer, one of the few freelancers hired to capture Meghan and Harry's early family moments, came forward anonymously. He said the Sussex team sent him strict instructions. Only photograph the child from angles pre-approved by Meghan's staff. No close-ups, no profile shots, nothing candid. When he pushed back, the shoot was canceled, never rescheduled. Later, when he saw the official photos released online, he said, "I didn't recognize the baby. I thought, that's not the kid I saw being prepped for the shoot." Something felt off. Even Meghan's own friends began distancing themselves. Quietly, without drama. One insider said, "Some of us started questioning things. Why we never saw the baby. Why we were never invited to the christening. It felt like they were hiding him, or hiding something about him." And when the birth certificate alteration leaked in early 2021, none of them were surprised, just disappointed. Because what should have been a moment of joy, Archie's birth, a modern royal milestone, had turned into a black hole of contradictions. And at the center of that black hole, a piece of paper, one name erased, one child redacted, one narrative rewritten. But if Meghan's name wasn't meant to be there, then whose name was? And what the ex-nanny found, scribbled at the bottom of a staff rota from May 5th, just one day before Archie's supposed birth, was a name no one could explain. A name she wasn't allowed to mention. A name that, when she whispered it to another staffer, earned her a warning letter from Royal HR. The name? Doria. Not Doria Ragland. Not Ms. Ragland. Not Meghan's mother. Just Doria. Scribbled hastily at the bottom of a rota sheet with the words, "Prep room for Doria, 3 a.m., M5. M5, May 5th. Just one day before Archie's reported birth. Why was Meghan's mother being assigned to a prep room at 3 a.m.? No one questioned it at the time. She was the grandmother, after all. She had flown in from LA weeks earlier. Maybe she wanted to be close. Maybe she wanted to support her daughter during labor. But the ex-nanny wasn't so sure. She said something about the tone of that note haunted her. It wasn't maternal. It was clinical. Not Doria to Meghan's suite, but prep room for Doria. Like she was the one receiving care, not visiting. She asked a staffer, off the record, casually, "Was Doria unwell that night?" The response, "Don't ask about that. You didn't see it." Didn't see what? And then, just hours later, the baby is born. Allegedly. The public doesn't hear about it for 8 hours. And when they do, there's confusion. Media reports at the time stated Meghan had gone into labor early that morning. But the official birth certificate, once released, stated Archie was born at 5:26 a.m., meaning Meghan had already given birth when the media was told she had only just gone into labor. Why the delay? What were they covering? And again, why was Doria's name tied to a midnight medical prep? One theory floated by a palace insider is so explosive, most journalists won't even touch it. That Doria wasn't just at Portland Hospital for support. That she may have played a role far more central than anyone realized. Some believe she was being prepped for surrogacy involvement. Whether biological or gestational, no one knows. But here's the kicker. The ex-nanny later found a medical invoice, misfiled in a laundry envelope. It listed postpartum recovery suite, VIP wing, Portland Hospital. The patient's name? Redacted. But the reference tag? RAG, LDN 0505. RAG, short for Ragland. LDN, London, 0505, May 5th. And just beneath the invoice total, handwritten in small, neat cursive, security escort required. Room 22, M to R handoff. M to R. Meghan to Ragland? Ragland to Meghan? Or something far more coded. The hospital, of course, won't comment, citing privacy laws. But the nanny remembers hearing chatter among the midwives. Not specifics, just whispers. One nurse reportedly said, "This whole birth is a mess. I don't know who I'm looking after." Another muttered, "Too many handlers." Too many locked doors. Even veteran staff found the whole experience unnerving. One former delivery nurse who has since retired told a colleague, "In all my years, I've never felt so deliberately misled." And it wasn't just the hospital. Let's fast forward to the christening. It took place in July 2019, nearly 2 months after Archie's birth. But here's the strange part. No public guest list. No press allowed. No photos of Archie's face. Just one official portrait. Taken by Chris Allerton, the couple's personal photographer. A single, tightly framed image. No wide shots. No video. Even the Queen reportedly skipped the event. And Meghan's mother? Present. Smiling. Silent. No interviews. No comments. But several staff members noticed how Doria interacted with Archie. Almost too comfortably. Not like a grandmother meeting her grandson, but like someone who had spent far more time with the child than anyone had been led to believe. One aide said, "She moved like someone with muscle memory. She knew how to rock him just right. How to calm him. Like a mother does." But wasn't Meghan the mother? Shouldn't she have had that intuition? Why did Meghan seem nervous during the portrait? Why was Harry unusually stiff? Why was the baby, once again, mostly hidden from view? And when a behind-the-scenes video clip was accidentally uploaded to a production server before being pulled within minutes. It showed a moment not captured in the official photo. Doria holding Archie, whispering something to him. Meghan standing just off to the side, watching, not reaching out, not smiling, just watching. And behind her, a woman, unknown, never identified, whispering into her ear. She looked furious, like something had gone wrong. The video vanished, wiped from the server, but not before it was screen captured. And in that still image, Meghan's expression told a different story. Not of a joyful mother, but of a woman whose control was slipping. So what does all this mean? What if Meghan's name was removed from the birth certificate because, legally, she wasn't the mother at all? What if the entire story we were fed, that of a radiant duchess giving birth to a royal baby in private, was fabricated? What if the photos, the timelines, the edits, the media manipulation were all designed to cover one massive, career-shattering secret? That Meghan and Harry's son might not be Meghan's son at all. And if that's true, if even a fraction of that is true, then it explains everything. The inconsistencies, the edits, the paranoia, the erased nanny, the fire story, the vanished video, and the constant, deafening silence whenever someone asks, where was Archie really born? Because if Meghan didn't give birth to him, and Doria was medically involved but concealed, then who is Archie's biological mother? And who else knew the truth, besides the nanny? Because what the ex-nanny found next wasn't just a document or a name. It was a photo, one never meant to be seen, one taken by accident. Blurry, but damning, because the woman holding the baby wasn't Meghan, wasn't Doria, wasn't even in the family. She was someone else entirely. And what came next would unravel the Sussex fairy tale from the inside out. Have you ever seen a pregnant belly collapse on national television? Not shift, not shrink, collapse. Because that's exactly what millions witnessed in 2019, when Meghan Markle stood up, smiled for cameras, and her baby bump visibly folded in on itself. In slow motion. Caught on HD video. Go back. Watch it for yourself. The moment is from her appearance at the SmartWorks charity. She was wearing a cream-colored coat, cradling her bump affectionately, surrounded by staff and clients. Everything looked picture-perfect, until it didn't. As she sat down, the bump protruded clearly. As she stood up, it deflated, slid upward, folded, not gradually, instantly, like fabric, like padding, like a prosthetic. And just like that, millions began asking the question no royal watcher ever expected to hear. Was Meghan Markle ever actually pregnant? Sounds outrageous, doesn't it? Sounds like internet conspiracy, fueled by tabloid trash and YouTube clickbait. But here's the problem. Too many people noticed. Too many videos went viral. Too many photographers whispered the same thing behind closed doors. Something was wrong with her bump. And the nanny? She saw it in person, up close, multiple times. And what she witnessed shook her to her core. Let's rewind. Meghan announced her pregnancy on October 15, 2018, the very first day of the royal tour in Australia. She and Harry had just landed in Sydney. She stepped off the plane glowing, hand on her belly, smiling wide. But insiders were caught off guard. Staff hadn't been briefed. Senior royals had only been informed hours before. Some weren't told at all. Why the rush? Why break tradition? Why not wait until returning to the UK? Because, according to a palace insider, the announcement was strategic. The timing wasn't about joy. It was about optics. That tour was tense. There were fractures already. The pregnancy softened things, made the press back off. And back off they did. For a time. But as the months wore on, the pregnancy became theatrical. Photographers noted that Meghan was constantly cradling her bump. Every event, every outfit, sometimes using both hands, even when standing still. Odd. Maybe, but not conclusive. Until you look at the bump itself. Let's break down 3 infamous bump anomalies that had social media buzzing. 1. The shifting bump at the Fashion Awards. In December 2018, Meghan made a surprise appearance to present a fashion award. Dressed in a sleek black one-shoulder gown, she looked radiant. But as she walked across the stage, cameras caught the bump moving, side to side. Not swaying like a pregnant belly should. Shifting, as if independent of her body. 2. The flat belly at Birkenhead. In January 2019, during a visit to Birkenhead, Meghan wore a form-fitting purple dress and a bright red coat. Her bump looked massive. One photographer snapped a side profile shot. 3 hours later, at a separate engagement on the same day, she appeared in a tan maternity dress with a much smaller bump. What changed? And why the drastic size fluctuation? 3. The collapsing bump at SmartWorks. This is the one even skeptics couldn't explain away. Video footage shows Meghan sitting, the bump firm and round. Then she stands, and it folds. One side caves in. The bottom flips up. It looks like fabric, not flesh. The clip went viral. Speculation exploded. But no mainstream outlet dared ask the question out loud. Was it fake? The nanny didn't need the video to confirm it. She had seen it firsthand. Multiple times. She wrote in her journal. The bump changes size almost daily. One day firm, the next nothing. I once walked into a room, and she turned quickly, her stomach bent sideways. It moved like silicone. She asked another staff member. He looked terrified. He whispered, "We don't talk about that. Ever." So what was going on? Why would a duchess, someone under global scrutiny, risk using a prosthetic bump? If Meghan wasn't pregnant, why pretend? Because, as the nanny soon realized, the pregnancy wasn't about biological truth. It was about narrative control. Let's entertain the most whispered theory. That Meghan and Harry used a surrogate. Legally, privately, quietly, maybe even with royal approval. That's not criminal. It's not even scandalous, not in the modern world. But it's not what they told us. They told us Meghan was glowing, that she was carrying the baby, that she was waking up at 4 a.m. to do yoga in her 3rd trimester. They gave interviews, cradled bellies, hosted a baby shower in New York City that reportedly cost over $300,000. Every image, every headline, every bump-holding moment, part of the performance. And if a surrogate was used, the consequences are immense. The British royal family is governed by very strict laws around succession. If Archie wasn't carried by Meghan, and no legal parental order was filed and approved, he may not be legally eligible for a title or line of succession. That single name, printed on a plastic hospital bassinet tag in the blurry photo the ex-nanny uncovered, confirmed one thing. Whoever this woman was, she had given birth to someone named Archie. But that woman wasn't Meghan Markle. Not even close. She had no makeup on. Her hair was tied back in a loose ponytail. She looked exhausted, dazed, and barely aware of the camera. And she was young. Much younger than Meghan. Maybe early 20s. This wasn't a duchess having her royal moment. This was a woman, a surrogate, resting in a hospital bed with a newborn. The nanny stared at the image for minutes. It wasn't labeled. No date. No context. Just this fragile, forgotten fragment slipped between folders. She tucked it into a legal pad and kept it hidden. It would be her secret for months. Until one day, she showed it to someone she thought she could trust. And that was the beginning of the end. Because within 48 hours, she was dismissed. Again. Only this time, it wasn't a formal conversation. It was a forced exit. She returned to her quarters after a break to find her bags already packed. Her keycard deactivated. An envelope on her pillow. Inside, a check, a thicker NDA, and one line handwritten in bold ink. You will say nothing. Ever. There was no name, no signature, just fear. The kind that crawls down your spine and settles deep in your bones. But let's pause. Ask yourself the obvious question. If Meghan had used a surrogate and wore a prosthetic bump for optics, why go to such extremes? Why fire people? Why risk the story unraveling? Why not be honest? The answer is simple. Optics equals power. Meghan and Harry were building a brand. They were rebranding the monarchy through modern love, through rebellion, through a new kind of royal narrative. And nothing sells a modern royal brand like the image of a glowing, pregnant duchess giving birth to a groundbreaking heir. A biracial child born into the most white, archaic institution in Europe. It was history. It was headlines. It was a movement. But if a surrogate had carried Archie, the narrative weakens. The emotional power, gone. The imagery, shattered. And with it, the commercial value of the Sussex story. And here's the ironic part. If they'd just been honest, they likely would have been applauded, praised for destigmatizing surrogacy, for sharing their journey. But that wasn't the route they chose. Instead, they staged bump cradles, photo ops, glowing interviews, and elaborate clothing choices. Let's talk about those clothes. According to two stylists who worked adjacent to the royal household, Meghan's wardrobe during her pregnancy was meticulously planned. One said, every outfit was chosen not just for fashion, but for silhouette control. Layers, angles, compression. She wasn't hiding a bump. She was hiding its mechanics. Another added, there were outfits where the bump protruded unnaturally. It didn't move, didn't sway, looked stiff. That's not how pregnant women move. And she's right. Ask any mother. Pregnancy isn't static. The body swells. It contracts. The belly rises, shifts, moves. Meghan's bump, on the other hand, did none of that. One minute it looked 6 months along. The next, nearly full term. Even her belly button placement seemed inconsistent. Petty? Maybe. But when everything starts to feel staged, even the small details matter. Especially when they conflict with biological reality. Let's bring it back to the nanny. The longer she kept silent, the more obsessed she became with the gaps. She started researching prosthetic pregnancy bumps. And what she found stunned her. There are companies, dozens, that manufacture ultra-realistic silicone pregnancy suits for film, TV, and even adoption cover stories. Some strap around the neck and under the chest. Others use adhesives. Some models even include simulated movement, baby kicks, heartbeat vibrations. She found one model online, retailing for $1,200, that matched perfectly with the SmartWorks footage. Down to the belly curvature. She printed the page, filed it in a folder marked proof. And here's where the story takes another turn. Months later, when Meghan and Harry released their Netflix docuseries, the nanny tuned in out of curiosity. She watched the home footage, the baby moments, the behind-the-scenes clips. And then there it was. A shot of Meghan, casually walking down a hallway. She's heavily pregnant, wearing leggings, a simple hoodie. But just as she turns, there's a faint crease at the top of her belly. An unnatural fold. The same type she saw on that first day in Frogmore. And in that moment, everything clicked. It wasn't paranoia, she said. It wasn't speculation. I had seen it before. And now the world could see it too. But the world didn't. Not really. Because the clip was brief. It flashed past in seconds. Only those watching carefully, those who had reason to know what to look for, could catch it. Everyone else, they were too busy crying, laughing, believing. Because that's the power of image. It tells you what to feel, so you don't stop to ask what's real. And when she tried to reach out to journalists, she was shut down. Emails ignored. Calls unreturned. One journalist agreed to meet her, off the record. But the moment she mentioned the bump, he pushed back from the table. We don't go near that. It's untouchable. Untouchable? Why? Because the pregnancy had become sacred ground. To question it was to question motherhood. To question the mother. And in today's media landscape, that was a landmine. But someone did listen. A retired OBGYN. She reviewed the photos, the video, the stylist notes. She didn't give a definitive verdict, but she did offer this. If she had been my patient, I would have asked for a full scan. Something's off. The bump's position and behavior is inconsistent with late-term gestation. So what now? What does this mean? Maybe Meghan did carry Archie. Maybe she just had a unique pregnancy. Maybe the bump folds were coincidence. Maybe the hospital records were just protective security measures. Maybe. But if everything is so innocent, why fire the nanny? Why erase the birth certificate? Why use NDAs, locked medical files, and edited travel manifests? Why not just tell the truth? Because the truth, it seems, might fracture everything. But the next discovery? The nanny's most chilling find? Wasn't a photo. Wasn't a diary entry. It was a baby monitor. One left behind during a hasty staff switch. One that had recorded hours of archived footage. And what she saw on that footage didn't just raise questions. It rewrote the entire story.